I want to thank you all for participating in this Rulemaking Advisory Committee. I'm going to go ahead and get started now. If folks start joining, and they won't know this as I'm saying it to you all, but if folks start joining as I'm talking, they will pick up and we can catch them up if they have to, but there's a decent amount we're going to try and get through today, so I'm just going to go ahead and get started. We're here today to talk about issues related to rulemaking for the division's grant program to incentivize fire hardening measures in rebuilding of buildings that were damaged or destroyed in the 2020 wildfires. You should have a copy of the agenda and the list of issues that we will be discussing. It is also available on the Building Codes Division website, and I'm hoping that either Laura or Melissa can drop that into the chat, a link to that into the chat. So if you don't have it with you, or if you need a link to it, you can grab that and pull it down so you'll be able to follow along. I'll also be giving the background and options for each issue as we go through the agenda. A quick note on how the meeting will proceed. After this brief introduction, I'm going to go down the list of folks that have asked to be participants here today and call everyone's name. And when I call your name, if you could just introduce yourself and what organization you represent, if any. And after that, I know there's a few folks here that have RSVP'd as observers only. I'm not planning on doing a roll call of observers, but if you have been placed on the observer list in error and I do not call your name during the roll call of the participants, please use the raise hand function after we were done with the introductions and we can straighten that out. If you are not a participant in the RAC, I ask that you keep your camera off and your microphone on mute for the meeting. If there's time at the end, we'll ask for additional comment from non-participants, and I will also provide some additional details on further opportunities for public comment beyond today's meeting. After we get through with the introductions, I will give a little bit of general background, and then we will move right to the first issue. Some folks in this meeting may or may not be familiar with our board process or our similar, more formal processes for meetings like this. This meeting is a more informal setting. No motions are going to be required. No votes are going to be taken. The intent is to have sort of an open discussion about the issues on the agenda and to inform the division's rulemaking process with that discussion. While we want everyone to be courteous to each other, but please feel free to chime in if you have something to say in the discussion. If you have a hard time getting a word in, or if you if you don't want to interrupt someone who's speaking, feel free to use the raise hand function, and I'll be sure to try and call on folks before we move on to the next item on the list so that everybody has a chance to give all that input that we're so looking to obtain here today. If it looks like I have missed your hand and am moving on, despite the fact that you've raised your hand and would like something to say, please feel free to interrupt me. Just shout out, "Hey, Andy," and we will stop, and I'll make sure to get everyone in there because sometimes things like that happen in this environment. As we go through the discussion of the issues, if you have any thoughts on specific fiscal impacts or adverse impacts that may result from different rulemaking choices, please voice them. This may include economic impacts on individuals, small businesses, local governments, or process impacts, cost and compliance impacts, or even a non-economic negative policy impact that we may not have considered. The division relies on this feedback when it files its rules with the Secretary of State. Finally, as this is a virtual meeting, please be aware that your microphone is likely better than you would like at picking up background noise. If you aren't speaking, and if you, like me, occasionally have really bad luck with someone's leaf blower, please go ahead and use the mute button so that you are not sharing the wonderful sounds of landscaping with the group. If you are calling on your phone, please don't put us on hold, because if there's any kind of hold music, we'll pick that up and there's nothing we can do about it at that point. It's just hold music all the time. If you need to sign off for some reason, if you do need to take that call, that's fine. You can, or if you're disconnected, you should feel more than willing to connect right back on the meeting. It's not going to lock you out or anything. Should be fine there. But with that said, I'm going to go ahead and start going down the list of folks that I have signed up as participants. The There's a couple of names on here that I have only read and am only pretty sure that I'm going to pronounce correctly. So if I do not pronounce it correctly, please accept my apologies and please make sure I know how to pronounce it after that. Thank you. First up, I have Kailani Mulder. I see you on the participants list. Or I see you on the participants list on the side, but you may be on mute. Okay, I'll just come back. Marilyn Cross.
Sorry about that. Marilyn Cross with the Mackenzie Valley Long-Term Recovery Group.
Thanks, Marilyn. Dale Turnley. Again, I can see you on the side, Dale, but you may be on mute still. Okay, I'm just going to move on. Devin Thompson.
Hi, Devin Thompson, Executive Director, Mackenzie Valley Long-Term Recovery Group.
Thanks, Devin. Helen Lara. Okay. Cass Conwell.
Cornwell.
Sorry.
That's okay. I'm a zone captain. I'm for Zone 9 with the Zone Captain Organization.
Thank you, Cass. Chris Tressel. Okay. I saw your message come on. Thank you. Allison Dottie.
Allison Doty with Glide Revitalization and Long-Term Recovery Group for the Archie Creek Fire.
Okay. Thank you, Allison. I'm going to circle back to Dale, who has his hand up.
All right, having some internet issues. Dale Turnley with the Mackenzie Valley Long-Term Recovery Group.
Thank you, Dale. Michael Newman.
Good afternoon, Michael Newman, Senior Director for Law and Public Policy at the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety.
Thank you, Michael. Faraz Hidayati.
Faraz is my colleague at IBHS. He is unable to join today.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Tom Young. Okay. Kevin Dial.
Recovery Manager for the Santiam Canyon Long-Term Recovery Group.
Thank you, Kevin. Brandon Kirk.
Brandon Rochelle Kirk, accounted for.
Thank you. Lauren Bowling.
Lauren Bowling with Associated Wall and Ceiling Contractors and Plasters Local 82.
Thank you, Lauren. And Marianne Milty.
I'm Marianne Milty with Layton County Land Management.
Thank you, Marianne. Okay, that is everyone that I have that was signed up to be a participant. Is there anyone here that was expecting to be a participant that whose name I did not call? Go ahead and raise your hand or chime in.
Hey, Andy, this is Ted Zook down Jackson County, Development Services Director and Building Official down here.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ted.
Hi, Andy. It's Matt Roselle, Building Codes Administrator for Clackamas County. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, I don't see any other hands. And no one else is chiming in. So I'm assuming if there's a name on the list that I do not recognize, you are just here to observe. And we welcome that. But that completes introductions. There are some staff on the line as well. The main person you'll be hearing from is me, so for better or for worse. But there's some other support folks here that I can call on if I need help. And there's some support folks that are helping actually make this whole thing run well. That is Melissa and Laura, who I mentioned earlier and who have my eternal thanks. Okay, a little bit of background. In this last legislative session, we had House Bill 5006 that allocated around $10.6 million to the Department of Consumer and Business Services, and then in turn to the Building Codes Division to put together a grant program to incentivize fire hardening improvements for buildings that are being rebuilt after that were damaged or destroyed in the 2020 wildfires. And that is what's bringing us here today. The language in the bill is not extensive. That's basically it. And so we're putting that program together. And as a part of putting that program together, we are holding this meeting along with, we had several community meetings and meetings with county staff that were all utilizing to sort of stand up this program, which we're anticipating having up and running early next year. With that, I am not going to use up any more of our time not talking about issues, and I'm going to go right into it. The first issue on our list is issue number 1, if you were following along at home. It's the eligibility criteria. The program the division has been tasked with creating is a fire hardening incentive program. The legislative history related to the passage of HB 5006 demonstrates that the goal of the program is to incentivize fire hardening when rebuilding structures that were damaged or destroyed in the 2020 wildfires. It is with this goal in mind that the division is planning to extend eligibility for program grants to people who are rebuilding structures that were damaged or destroyed in the 2020 wildfires. As a result, if a structure that was damaged in a 2020 wildfire is sold after the wildfire and the new owner is rebuilding the structure, the new owner would be eligible for this program because they are the person that is in the best position to rebuild the damaged structure using a fire hardening measure that this program will incentivize. In addition to applicants who are rebuilding during the life of the program, the division extends to provide these grant monies to applicants who have already started or completed rebuilding. So long as they have performed eligible work and the rebuilt work is on a structure damaged in the 2020 wildfires. So we include a couple of options in these issues. Those are considered a starting off point for the discussion. It's what we're thinking about when we're putting the issue in here. So options would be base program eligibility on rebuilding or having rebuilt a structure that was damaged or destroyed in the 2020 wildfires and including fire hardening measures in the rebuild. Base program eligibility on some other factor or mix of factors for structures that were damaged or destroyed in the 2020 wildfires. That is all of our text on issue 1, and I welcome any input from the group.
I have a couple of questions for you on eligibility. The event was known as the Straight Line Winds and Wildfire event. Do homes that were damaged by the straight line winds but not by the fire qualify for this program?
Thanks for the question, Marilyn. Ultimately, right now, we're sort of like collecting. If you have thoughts on that, I'd love to hear them. We haven't made final decisions on a lot of these things, and that's why we're having the meeting now. If we were gathering your input after we've made the final decisions, it would. So if you have thoughts, I'd love to hear them.
Well, my thought is that if they did, in fact, manage to improve a structural element of their home in the process of making those repairs, that they should be included as well. But I honestly don't have a specific example. However, Dale Turnley might, since he lives in the area that was impacted by the straight line winds, and he is a contractor. So I don't know if there are specific examples or not. It was really a question. I also have a question about the eligibility in general. I don't read legislation real well, so it's a little arcane to me. But so these funds must be used strictly for hardening for a wildfire and not any other kind of disaster, right? So another example, some of the homes that have to be rebuilt are now finding themselves in a floodplain designation that is different than what it was when they originally built their home. So they have to rebuild to floodplain requirements, and that adds a significant additional expense to their reconstruction, but it doesn't harden them for a fire, it hardens them for a flood. Would those be eligible?
The improvements that we're incentivizing with this program are strictly fire hardening improvements. And that was direct from legislative language to put a grant program together to incentivize fire hardening.
Okay. There's also a question around eligibility around the sale of the property and the award being transferred to the purchaser of the property. There is some evidence that properties are being purchased speculatively to resell at a future point. The property values in this area are recovering enormously rapidly, so I don't anticipate that would be a long time. Would that grant follow the purchaser through a second step?
The way we're sort of conceiving of the program right now, and like I said, all of this is still in development, is that the person that is the owner that is eligible for the program is the owner that is rebuilding and makes the fire hardening improvement. So if someone's buying the property speculatively so that they can sell the property without doing any rebuilding, that person's never going to be eligible for a grant because you have to do the rebuilding to be eligible for the grant. But if they're buying the property speculatively and then they rebuild, including fire hardening improvements in that rebuild, and then sell, they would be eligible for the program.
Okay.
If there's is there any other thoughts on eligibility criteria on issue 1? Oh, I see a hand up. Have an eye out for it. Marianne, feel free to jump in.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to, I guess, voice my support for the first option. That's pretty consistent with what we've been doing for the holiday farm fire legislation in general, that it applies to the person who's doing the rebuilding rather than the person who was the owner at the time of the fire. So that seems like the simplest, most consistent way that I can see.
Thanks, Brian. Tidza?
So Annie, I'd just like to echo that thought. The intent of this is to fire hardening structures. Whether or not it's the original owner or not should be irrelevant. Our objective is to make sure that we have more fire resistant houses. So I don't think eligibility should be required. It should be just strictly to the owner at the time. Some people may have been underinsured and sold and moved on, and that's through no fault of their own. But at the end of the day, our objective is to make houses more fire resistant.
Thanks, Tim.
Brandon Kirk here, landowner in Lyons, and I want to echo both those people's that we're rebuilding right now, and we're trying to fire harden as much as possible. And it's a fairly concern of ours that we're trying to talk our neighbors into also building fire hardening as well, because to us it's kind of going to be redundant if we put up steel siding and metal roofs and our neighbor 30 feet away is, building a cedar shake home. So regardless, owner is irrelevant to us, primary homeowner or even a secondary homeowner. A lot of our neighbors, this is their vacation home up in the woods. And to us, we just want to fire harden our community. So hopefully we can prevent this kind of thing happening again. Two-pronged question when it comes to eligibility that kind of goes off that first topic. We're talking about fire hardening communities and protecting our homes from future wildfire disasters. Why is this criteria not outreach to the fires of 2021, i.e. that happened down in Klamath Falls? There's communities down there that are going to have the same needs that are in our state. So my first concern is seems kind of funneled into just the needs of 2020, when I feel like it should be echoed through 2021 and even the upcoming 2022 season, if the general consensus is we're trying to fire harden our communities as a whole. And then my second question to that, when it comes to eligibility, is there any ways, this is expensive to come right out. This is a godsend to a lot of us homeowners that are trying to, rebuild in the future. But given that expense, is it possible if somebody wants to pull all their money together into one bucket, like take all the windows and just, build a metal roof? Is there that kind of option? Or is at this time, it's just strictly those buckets of windows, soffits, siding, and etc.?
I'm going to take your questions in reverse order because that's the way that they're fresh in my mind, but I will answer them both. Right now, and there's going to be another issue down on this list, and you may have already looked at that, where we're going to be looking a little bit more at the sort of the menu of fire hardening options that are available. Right now, where the plan is to incentivize 6 or 7, depending on the type of structure we're talking about, different categories of improvement, and each of those categories would have a specific grant amount tied to it. So the pooling of all the grant funds to offset one specific item is not right now how the program's envisioned. For the 2021 versus 2020 eligibility, right now we're operating under there's a budget note that went with the House Bill 5006 legislation that indicated that it was specifically for 2020 wildfire rebuilding. That said, we are sort of planning the program under the very real possibility that 2021 will end up getting folded in. They will change that budget note and add 2021 to the eligibility list. And so we're planning everything in the program right now around the possibility that that will happen. And so it should not really impact the flow of the program, or it'll be very easy to fold those people, that group of people, into the eligible group of people if we have to. Did I get both your questions sufficiently, Brandon?
Yeah, you did great. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Oh, sorry. The hands are very small on my screen, so I apologize that I don't see them right off. Kevin Dial.
Question comes up about homeowners that have rebuilt. They have recovered, and they're still under case management for some of the last pieces, but maybe they rebuilt without the fire hardening. Is there an allotment or a possibility of them upgrading if they didn't put the remediation on for fire hardening at this point?
If someone has already completed rebuilding and then they see our program, they want to take advantage of the program and they want to go back and put on, like, for example, fire hardened siding or fire hardened roofing, they would be just as eligible for our program as someone that has not yet started rebuilding. What we care about is that the property gets fire hardened. What order of operations that happens in, if it's a building that's being rebuilt from the 2020 wildfires right now, what order of operations it happens in is less important to the fact, the idea of the program. Then, as long as that property gets fire hardened, we're happy.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Cassandra.
Yes, you were saying that each step has its own grant money tied to it, basically, like like a roof versus a fence versus landscaping. So if a person were to do some, but not every single step, they would still be eligible for some fire hardening money?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And just to be, in case I'm going to go out on a limb and potentially head off. Like I said, there is an additional issue on here where we'll be going, it'll be more of a deep dive onto like what those various fire hardening options are. So I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of those on this first issue before moving on. And then we run out of stuff to talk about on the actual fire hardening menu, because it's actually going to have each of the different fire hardening options that we're trying to incentivize. Not trying to stifle anybody. I just want to make sure that you don't think that this is your only opportunity to comment on that.
Great, thank you.
Jenny?
Yeah, so I'm a property owner in Lyons, and we're currently in the process of rebuilding. And I'm wondering if there will be any availability for people to get grant money for stuff that they've already done so that they can use that money for other rebuilding efforts. Like there's people who are already, like we're rebuilding our detached garage right now, and it was made out of wooden siding and we're putting metal on for fire hardening. But we have other structures we need to rebuild. Will we be able to use any of that grant money or other people who have rebuilt their homes for other things they need to do, or will they be ineligible because they've already completed the work?
Folks are going to be eligible for this program if the work is already completed, if it's in the process of being completed, or if it hasn't even started yet. The program is agnostic as to those three situations. So if you have already finished a fire hardening improvement, you are eligible. When we start processing applications early next year, you're eligible to come in, file an application, show that the work's been completed, and get the grant money that just as much as you would if you hadn't started until after the program started. Marilyn? You're on mute, Marilyn.
Sorry about that. So we're using the term structure here rather than dwellings. So any structure is eligible for the program that was damaged in the fire, correct?
The legislation says, yeah, it's residence or commercial building. So yeah.
But a structure could be a barn, a pump house, something other than a house?
Accessory buildings is an area that we're still looking at. If you have thoughts, I'd love to hear them. Ultimately, like as much as I am more than happy to answer everybody's questions, but we're selfishly also hoping to get some of your input as well out of this meeting.
Well, I would think that any building should be included in the program for exactly the reason people have cited, which is any structure becoming hardened improves the survivability for all of us, right? So my next door neighbor, for example, their cedar shake house is standing that had a composition roof on it. The cottage that they built only 2 or 3 years ago with a metal roof, destroyed. So it's very quixotic how these things happen. And it would seem to me as if improving any structure would have a benefit to all of us. So I would be encouraged to do that. But then it leads to a follow-on question, which is if someone had multiple structures damaged on their property, would they be eligible for multiple iterations of the benefit?
That is still something we're looking at.
Okay.
Like I said, do you have thoughts?
Again, to the same point, which is, yeah, the more structures we can harden, the better off we all are. So I would say certainly as long as the funds can be applied equitably, so people who are farther down the road in getting into their rebuilding still have access to the funds. And that is another question then, which is rental properties versus owned properties. So one of the things that we have, extraordinarily little of in this valley is rental property for people who were renting, who were displaced. If the property owner is rebuilding that property as a rental property, would they also be eligible for these funds? My vote again would be yes, but that's my vote.
Thank you, Marilyn. I appreciate it. And I'm going to keep trying to poke you guys to give me actual input as well, along with, I'm happy, like I said, happy to answer all your questions, but I might start forcing you to trade me every once in a while. Is there anybody else that has any other comments or thoughts on eligibility criteria issue 1? Allison.
Just a quick thought. Is this going to be homeowner direct, or can they do a pass through a nonprofit?
Are you talking about, can you tell me a little more about what you mean by the question so I can answer? Are you talking about the payment?
Yeah, is there any way that we could help facilitate this other than, put an application through? Could our organization write for a grant through you to take care of families in our area? I guess is the...
Right now, the grants are planned to be directly to the owner, building owner.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Administrator Alana Cox.
Thanks, Sandy. I'm Alana Cox, Administrator of Building Codes. Really appreciate the conversation. Great turnout. Just thought I'd throw in a couple things. Allison, to your question, our plan on administering these grants is to partner with local government, the counties. And so we've been working on that process kind of in parallel so that it'll be a local application process, at least within each of the counties that was impacted by the 2020 wildfires. And then on the accessory structure question, which is a question we've really kind of been wrestling around with, I'm just going to throw out some other considerations for conversation. In partnering with the counties, part of our intention was to use some of their existing processes in the building department, including, regular inspections, so that while they're doing an inspection, they could also verify eligibility for the program, verify that you did the fire hardening actions. And so that's where we were kind of struggling on some of these accessory structures that would not be regulated, that are kind of outside of normal permitting and inspection on the structural side. And the other thing we've been wrestling with is we have a flat dollar amount, right? We have $10 million to distribute. And so, if we include too many kinds of structures, then we're not able to give out as much on the residences and commercial properties. And, I really am interested in people's feedback on that question, because we're trying to keep it simple and straightforward, but again, reach that community benefit of a more fire hardened community. So those are a couple of the other considerations we were wrestling with in that space. Thanks.
Thanks, Lana. Michael.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. And appreciate Allison's question. I think what I would encourage you guys to do as an agency, with the understanding this is clearly a local process, but I think there's an opportunity for some of these organizations who are working hand in hand with their neighbors, whether it's Allison's or up to McKinsey, where just simply filing the paperwork on behalf of a constituent. So it's not really, I'm envisioning maybe queuing up Allison's question, not that they're looking to be a pass-through, but simply helping with the paperwork process. And so if we've got an organization like the LTRGs who can just simply facilitate getting the paperwork in on behalf of the client, and again, that money is going back to the client directly, I think that's something that we should consider. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. And yeah, I hope I did not make it sound too much like we're not trying to engage with those local groups, because we know that you have better connection to these communities that we're hoping to serve than we can just here in our office in Salem. So we definitely want to engage with you all in terms of finding as many different avenues for folks to getting into the program as we can. I just answered the one funding question as opposed to the broader question of how can we all work together, which hopefully in as many ways as possible. Jenny.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up another point about people rebuilding and stuff is if their house or their structure is a different size than the previous one. I would hope that the grant would be available to them, at least up to what they previously had for that structure. Let's say it was, 1,000 square foot and they're building a home that's 1,300 square feet, that they could at least get funding for that 1,000 square foot home fire hardening instead of being disqualified. Because I know that there are some grants that if they build bigger than what they had before, then they're basically disqualified completely.
Yeah, no, our program is not going to be restrictive in terms of the rebuilding size. The grant amount itself is going to be a flat amount. So if you're going from a smaller home to a larger home, the grant amount for siding might cover less of the siding than it would on the smaller home, but you're not going to be ineligible because of that.
Okay, yeah.
Brandon Kirk here again. In regards to multiple structures on a property site, we just put steel siding on our house and our shop. And to me, it kind of comes down to being redundant. And what I don't want to see happen is if we hold it just to primary dwellings, then what's going to happen is people are going to fireproof their house and they're not going to fireproof the shop that's right next door to it. So the shop's going to burn, which could possibly, influence structural integrity of that house. So that's kind of where I stand on it. It's and we're happy to get whatever help we can get from the state. I mean, it truly is a godsend. And it's $6,000 seems like a small bucket, but I mean, it will help a lot. And when it does, I understand. I think, if we have 4 sheds, do they all need to be fireproofed? I don't know. That's a different story. But when it comes to, like I said, secondary structures that are next to the primary dwelling, I just don't want to see those not be hardened and then, create a problem down the road. So that's kind of where I stand to answer the admin's question earlier.
Thanks, Brandon. I don't see any other. Oh, I spoke too soon. Jenny.
Just really quick, I kind of wanted to second what he was saying because my husband was actually here during the fire trying to save our house, and our well house was cinder block and metal roof that we had just put on it. And although it burned down because the power pole next to it burned down, we could see from the photos that the metal roof was keeping the fire from catching the house so much. It was still bursting windows and stuff, but it was cooling it enough to where it wasn't lighting up the tree that was next to the house and burning down our whole home. Because if we had left the asphalt shingle roof on, the blaze would have been twice as high. Like the fire department's here and they're like, you are so lucky you had, because our pump house is probably 15, 20 feet away from our house. And if we had a different material, it would have burned the whole house down. So I really, would say that accessory structures make a big difference in saving somebody's house.
Thanks, Jenny. Okay. Any other hands, thoughts, comments on eligibility criteria issue 1? And if you think of something later that pertains to issue 1 at the end, I'm going to say, is there anything that occurred to you during when we were talking about other issues that you want to follow up on from an earlier issue? So don't feel like if you don't say it right now, you'll never have another opportunity. You definitely will. Okay, but I am going to move on to issue 2 now. This issue is verification of eligibility. So as discussed above, eligibility for a grant award is expected to include the applicant owning a structure that was damaged or destroyed in a 2020 wildfire, the applicant rebuilding or replacing that structure, the applicant including qualifying fire hardening measures during the rebuild or replacement, and the applicant completing work on the fire hardening measures selected. During the course of the applicant's process through the program, each of the preceding factors will need to be supported with appropriate documentation. Copies of those supporting documents will be retained by the program and the applicant will retain the originals. The table below lists the pieces of information that the program will seek to verify and the types of supporting documents the division anticipates accepting for verification. So there is this little table there that you should be able to see if you have it in front of you. I'm going to read through it really quick also. The first piece of information is the applicant's identity, which will be supported with government issue photo ID. So driver's license, state ID, passport, military ID, all acceptable government issue photo IDs. Property ownership, so title, manufactured home ownership documentation, or other documentation at the discretion of the county building official. And this might just be verifying ownership on the county's own property ownership records. Completed eligible work. So the actual fire hardening improvement has been done. And this could be verified by a building department inspection. suitable photographic or video evidence, paid invoice for service and materials potentially, or other documentation at the discretion of the county building official. The division seeks feedback on the proposed plan of verifying information to confirm program eligibility. And again, there's some options of the division should use this proposed list of documentation to verify program eligibility, or the division should modify this proposed list of documentation to verify program eligibility. And if you like that second one, please provide some additional details on how the list should be modified. Any thoughts on either the items that we're trying to or the information that we're trying to verify, or how we're trying to verify it?
Brandon Kirk here again. I feel like I'm trying not to take over, but I want to say I do think it's pertinent. Speed to us that are rebuilding, speed is the utmost pertinent detail right now. And I found that working with government agencies can be slow in the process, and I get it. You guys really don't have the extra staff. I don't think any of the counties is going to have extra staff to deal with administering this program and doling out funds. But that's where I think the LTRGs and the charitable organizations that have really can be I hate to say middleman, but throw out a quicker access. So we work with the San Diego integration team, and they've been awesome with helping us do paperwork, file certain things, and work with the local county and state agencies. They've already had verifications done. So I think if, counties that have it, if they can partner with those agencies to kind of maybe have a faster process where they can, verify and get speedy resources quicker. And if people still want to go through the county, they can go through, I don't want to say a slower process, but more of a process with the county. Because I mean, we're 16 months in, and we're all kind of looking to be like, okay, what do we do now? So honestly, I think that's, to us that are rebuilding, that's an important detail. We're all used to verifying documentation and IDs and all that. It's just about speed, honestly. And that's all I kind of have to say about that.
Thanks, Brandon. Allison.
So I agree with what Kirk had just said, because we already have, I would say, on the 300 families that we're dealing with, that we have 60 to 80% of those, all that documentation that you just explained already in our files. And so that would be easy for us to, provide that to, and that's what my pass-through thought was, is that would be easy for us to then turn around and send it directly to you, or send it, to the county or whomever you're pushing this through. So I agree with that. And you're right, speed is very important. But I wanted to know also is this for second homes? If this is somebody's second home, will they be eligible as well?
As of right now, we haven't decided right now, yes, we're planning on saying, we're not planning on discriminating, I guess, in terms of eligibility between primary and secondary residences.
Okay, I think that would be great. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts on the sort of data points that we're wanting to verify and how we're wanting to verify them? If not, I will go ahead and move on to our third issue. Okay, I don't see any hands. So issue number 3 is our fire hardening options and the grant amounts associated with them. The division has developed and attached proposed lists of grant eligible fire hardening measures. There's one list for residential structures, including manufactured homes, and one list for commercial structures. There are similarities between these lists because a lot of the same materials and methods that make a residential structure more resistant to wildfire damage also make a commercial structure more resistant to wildfire damage. Also included on each list of fire hardening measures are proposed grant amounts that would be tied to each measure. The grants for each measure are to incentivize applying that measure to the entire structure. To receive the windows grant, for example, all of the structure's windows would need to be fire hardened. These individual grant amounts were calculated by considering the total funds available for the grant program, the number of properties which may utilize the grant, the relative cost of each measure, and the measure's impact on the structure's ability to resist damage from wildfire. As you consider and discuss the grant amounts, the division welcomes feedback on whether the current proposed grant amount will sufficiently incentivize participation in the program and adoption of the specific fire hardening measure that is being incentivized. Additionally, the division plans to use flat grant amounts for the program. As a result, if an applicant includes one of the proposed measures in their rebuild, then the entire associated grant amount will be dispersed. I can't read. The intent of this choice is in part to promote equity in the distribution of grant funds, as a flat grant amount will offset a larger share of a smaller project. As an example, if two applicants both install Class A roofs on their rebuilt residence, and one home is a 1,500 square foot home and the other home is a 7,000 square foot home, both applicants would receive the same flat grant amount of $2,200. The grant amount would then have a greater proportional impact on the smaller home. The division has broken out each proposed list as a sub-issue, and we'll discuss each in turn. The proposed lists of fire hardening measures should be attached to the sort of the end of your packet. If you're following along on your copy of the packet, towards the bottom of the document, you should be able to see both fire hardening lists. So we have sub-issue 1, which is the fire hardening measures and associated grant amounts that are included in the residential and manufactured structures list. And each of these sub-issues are going to have the same sort of options attached to them, but we'll tackle one first. So the options would be the division should continue with this proposed list of fire hardening measures and grant amounts. The division should modify the proposed list of fire hardening measures. Please describe any suggested additions to or deletions from the list. The division should modify the proposed grant amounts tied to the proposed fire hardening measures. Please describe any suggested changes to the proposed grant amounts. Assuming the video means you have something, Michael.
I do. Thank you, Andy. And for context for those on the call, as I said before, I'm with the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. We're a 501c3 nonprofit research and communications organization enabled by the property insurance industry's investment. And we fund building safety research. In fact, you can see our facility behind me on my Zoom filter. We've been studying wildfire for more than 10 years. And that research, particularly looking at the ways that embers ignite into flames and then flames catch onto structures, underlies the recommendations we're going to make today. So I have some specific ones. For the roof element, I think the current proposal is that grants should be provided for Class A or Class B roofs. In the engineering judgment of my colleagues, it's really that should be limited to Class A roofs. For the ventilation openings element, just making options available not just for attic openings, but also for crawl space openings. You really want to have that fire ember resistant mesh over all openings, regardless of where they are in the home or the structure, that is. For the element regarding porches, balconies, decks, we suggest including as an option an investment in underdeck enclosures, making sure that debris can't kind of blow in the wind and get trapped underneath those elements. And then finally, we suggest providing grants for 2 additional elements, installing a 6-inch vertical non-combustible zone around the base of the home. Essentially, that first 6 inches all along where the ground hits the structure. You want that to be non-combustible. Again, because so much debris tends to get trapped there, and embers also tend to get trapped there, as we've seen through our research. You want that area to be non-combustible so it doesn't wick up and ignite the home flames. And then finally, adding an element on fencing, particularly where there's fencing that connects or attaches to the structure. That fencing, if it's combustible, ought to be replaced with non-combustible fencing just for that section attaching to the structure. And where there may be back-to-back fencing with neighboring properties. That's again an area where debris can collect and then catch flame. So we suggest providing grants for the removal of back-to-back fencing on neighboring properties. I just, beyond that, we just have one more general comment, if you will. And that's everything that we've done in our research suggests that wildfire resilience is systems-based. It's not any one thing that bends down the risk curve. It's a collection of things. It's a suite of mitigation actions. And this great grant program is terrific to help homeowners and business owners, as I've heard from the folks on this call today. But it would be great for you, and we're happy to work with Oregon on this, to contextualize these individual actions you're providing grants for, to help property owners understand what's the full set of actions that, when taken together, will really help reduce that risk to their property. We'll submit written comments as well to Administrator Cox and to the division that kind of lays this out with greater specificity. But we look forward to working with you if we can.
Thanks, Michael.
Brandon Kirk here again. I want to say just thank you. I mean, as a homeowner, we lost our house. I lost my small business. We lost our shop. We lost everything up. We're up 15 miles up the Little North Fork, and I'm appreciative. I mean, it seems like $6,000 isn't a lot, but when you break it down, you guys got $10 million. That's about 1,500 homes or 1,500 opportunities off the top of my head. And that's great. I mean, we're very appreciative. I know my neighbors and community members will be appreciative. So just thank you. And we look forward to seeing what else the future holds for us.
Thanks, Brendan. I don't know if I'm cutting this off before people have had a chance to finish taking a look. Oh, Marilyn.
Of course, the other person hogging this event. One of the things that we've actually been asked about and occurs to me is helpful, and I certainly don't have the kind of research behind it to substantiate this, but one of the things that we think may have helped some of us who are sort of sitting in an island where everything burned around us, but we fortunately survived, is water. And in these rural communities, of course, water comes from wells. So the notion is that keeping a power source available for a well, so even when we have to evacuate, I know for a fact my generator kept running for a week after the fire. So if we have to evacuate, we can keep water running around our houses, and that act alone seems to help. Now, again, I don't have the research to substantiate this, but is there any way we could incorporate some grant funds for people who would put power generation on their wells to keep them running at the time of an event when they had to leave?
I am not sure what that would look like, Marilyn, but we will take the feedback in, and it will absolutely be considered with everything else that we get out of this meeting, and I appreciate it. All right. Is there anyone else that has any thoughts or on additions or subtractions from the residential and manufactured structures? Oh, Jenny.
Yeah, I was wondering if this is kind of a complete list of the proposed items for grant funding, because we had wondered about fire hardening, like landscaping or sprinkler systems or other measures that could be used for fire hardening the structure of the home.
The list that is in the document it's the proposed list right now, and it sort of came to be because we're focusing on the fire hardening of the structure itself. I think Michael jumped on video because he might also wants to chip in there, and I will let him.
Thanks. So Jenny raises a really good point. We limited our comments to the actual structure, but if you're going to expand beyond that, landscape management is so essential, particularly in the 0 to 5 foot zone around the structure. Our research has indicated that that zone needs to be impeccable. No combustibles whatsoever, no vegetation, no hoses, no stacked, wood or lumber or debris. And that makes a tremendous difference. So if you are, the problem with that though, I will say, is it's not one and done. You put on a new roof, you can put on a new roof and you don't have to worry about it other than making sure debris hasn't collected on it. With the landscape management pieces of resilience, it requires ongoing awareness, ongoing care, and ongoing vigilance. And that can be challenging, which is not to say it shouldn't be addressed in your grant program, because it is a very important part of the overall system-based approach to wildfire resilience I referenced before.
Thank you both for that feedback. This is Alana Cox again. The Office of the State Fire Marshal is responsible for defensible space, which is, I think, what we're talking about. And I know there's someone from there on this call today. We've been talking about this program kind of in a vacuum, but there are other agencies doing really great work in this space also. I know the State Fire Marshal has some really, has some plans around defensible space. And then there's also a Department of Energy program around energy efficiency grants for 2020 survivors. So just putting that on the record here also, we agree defensible space is really important, but there is another agency working on that issue. And I think they're here to hear those comments. Thanks.
Excellent. All right. Any other hands for the residential and manufactured structures list? If not, we can move on. It's the same 3 issues for the commercial list. And if anybody has any comments on those, I would love to hear them.
Brandon, once more. Then I promise I'll stop. Well, I'm a small business owner who lost I had my office right outside between my shop and my home. So are there any further options for a structure and my business structure, or am I stuck to just one property with 3 outbuildings, 1 grant? Which I understand. So I guess I'm looking, is there a separation between residential and commercial on the same site?
The way I think we're envisioning the program right now, and actually I'm gonna flag this and Lana jump in if I say anything out of line. My interpretation of our program right now would be that the commercial property and the residential property on the same property, so commercial building and the residential building on the same property would both qualify for like 2 different application sets. So you'd be able to apply for your residence and you'd be able to apply for your commercial property, and they would both be on their own grant path. Does that make sense, Brandon?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Yeah, I had been thinking about it in terms of, are they the same or separate structures? I think if you have, say, a home-based business that's in the same structure that's your residence, that residence probably qualifies for 1 set of funds. Whereas if you have 2 buildings and one is your commercial building and one is your residential building, then each building would qualify, is how I've been thinking about it. Although that's why we're having this conversation. So thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah, thank you both.
Any other comments on the commercial list, or if I went too fast and got off the residential list too quickly, feel free to throw it back to that. Either or. Any comments at all? Raise your hand.
I was just going to comment to the defensible space. In the Mackenzie Valley, we have an organization called Pure Water Partners, which is addressing that defensible space. I just entered into a 7-year management plan agreement with them, in which, yes, it's not one and done. It is 7 years that we're looking at, one, in removing invasive species from the property that seem to have thrived in the wildfire. We're looking at plantings on the property to replace those areas that burned with native plantings, and then the 7-year plan to help maintain this environment once it's established. The other thing that I haven't actually encountered anybody else who had this experience, but just a few months before the fire, I had a letter from my insurance company, which just notified me that they were going to be inspecting the property. They weren't asking my permission, mind you. They were just notifying me and there was going to be somebody here inspecting my property. And I was unaware of the fact, I wasn't here at the time that they arrived, whenever it was. I don't even know exactly when it was. All I know is a few weeks later, I got another nice letter in the mail saying, your property looks fine. We don't have any recommendations of changes for you to make. So it would seem to me that, you know, when we look at all of the resources that we have at our disposal, insurance may be one of those resources that we should encourage companies to help us examine our property as well, to understand what we're doing that's working or not working. Now, I never got that detailed an explanation of why they thought my property was fine. It was just like, we don't have any recommendations for you. So, you know, and the flames only touched my house in one place. So I got extremely lucky. Don't know why.
Thanks, Marilyn. Allison?
Just going back to the commercial piece of this, when it comes to an owner that has rentals, that he owned all the rentals, but they did not have insurance. So when they go to rebuild, will he be eligible for all those buildings or no?
As we're envisioning it right now, they would be eligible.
Okay. So each building would qualify for one set of dollars.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Brandon here again.
Yeah.
On that note, I can see how that could easily get convoluted, because if I had 10 rental properties, maybe only 2 of them were actually on the books and the other 8 were not. So I would hope there would be extra verification in that. Not that I'm saying that there's going to be abuse, but I mean, unfortunately, that's the world we live in. Because then on the flip side, I can also see residentials coming back and being like, hey, if they're getting grants for their personal properties, I want grants for each one of my buildings. So I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here on that side. Furthermore, to kind of bounce off Marilyn's comments, the Oregon State Fire Marshal has been outstanding in their fire-wise. And
if you could still hear me, Brandon, you cut out a little bit right after Firewise. I haven't heard anything from you since then.
Outstanding. And if anybody has any questions, they've been fires in the future. They're also talking about, you know, further grants and funding for generators for more rural outposts and communities and neighbors. So there's a lot of this out there. I know this is just for grant fire hardening questions and comments, but I know I've heard a lot of other things that I just reach out to your LTRGs and your charitable organizations, and they'll have a lot of this information for you. Again, I just want to say I'm appreciative for everything you guys are doing. And yeah, just thanks again.
Thanks, Brandon. Allison, is your hand up again, or is that, I didn't see if it went away and came back, or if it's still the same hand?
I don't remember either, but let me say one more thing. I think this is a Brandon and Allison show. So, and maybe Marilyn, I'll throw her in too. Anyways, just something to think about. On a lot of our properties, we've been utilizing the assessor's office as far as identifying who owns properties. And that's kind of our, has kind of been our go-to for when it comes to proof of residency. However, I know that in Douglas County alone, a lot of our properties are 0 properties. So it would be like 0 address on Rock Creek Road or something along those lines, just because we had a lot of properties that were built prior to when the, building zones all came or whatever. Or they were built without county knowledge, or they were built, so there's a lot of other factors that goes into that, because some of these properties were homesteaded. So when you guys are looking for verification of housing, if it's in that burn zone, I would appreciate it if we take that in consideration as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Allison. Okay. If there isn't any other hands coming up for the menu items, I'm going to move on to issue number 4. Okay, I don't see any. So this is issue number 4, the grant award distribution timing. If it is determined that an applicant may receive grant money under this program, the division must determine when to distribute this money to the applicant. To ensure that the funds are used for their intended purpose, the division anticipates dispersing the grant to the applicant once the applicant confirms that the work has been performed. The local building department is responsible for verification. Potential methods of verification include an inspection by the local building department, photographic or video evidence, documentation, paid invoices listing the work performed and the materials used, or other documentation that a local building official finds is acceptable proof that the work has been performed. The division is not planning to require that the applicant have already paid for the measure. The division seeks feedback on the timing of grant distribution to eligible applicants during the program. A couple of options: distribute the grant awards to eligible applicants after the incentivized measure work has been performed and there is sufficient evidence to confirm the same. Distribute grant awards in some other way or at some other time. Do folks have any thoughts on this?
So I'd like to use the town of Blue River as an example for just a moment to understand how long this program may be in place. Blue River had serious problems before the fire with septic systems, and it also had an extremely aging water system. And it is actually, I think, quite probable that some people in Blue River will have to wait until a wastewater system is implemented in Blue River before they can actually rebuild, because of the inability to actually build a septic system that would be applicable in current code. Is there any way for those owners, and of course, as we know, Blue River is a town that was completely destroyed. Is there any way we can sort of reserve funds somehow for people who do intend to rebuild, but know they really can't do so for some period of time until some of the infrastructure issues are solved? Funds have been allocated by the state legislature to address some of these issues in Blue River. So we anticipate that they will be, but they're just long, they just take a long, long time to fix.
Thanks, Marilyn. And since I see Alana Cox, Administrator of BCD, I'm going to let her talk about this.
Sure, thank you. And I heard the feedback earlier about speed, which we absolutely hear that people are going to be at very different places in the rebuilding process for a while. Right now, we have this money to distribute by the end of the biennium. So we have about a year and a half left. And my hope is that by the time we get to next winter 2023, this program is going well. We're hitting against the funds. People are availing themselves. We're getting more fire hardened communities. And then I think we're in a really good position to go to the legislature and say, please extend this program. Give us some more time for the folks who are continuing to rebuild, because we know most folks are not going to be able to rebuild within that 2-year time frame. But we'll need some legislative action to do it. But it's our intention and to be able to go to them and say, we've got a successful program, it's helping people. We could use some more time and maybe we could use some more money too, depending on how things are going at that point. So it's not something I think we can guarantee now, but certainly our hope is that we'd be able to extend a successful program.
Thank you. That's great.
Michael?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I just wanted to double down on Alana's comments. For those of you that don't know me, Michael Mortar, I'm the Wildfire Recovery Ombudsman for the state of Oregon. And I've been, throughout this last 15 months, been working very closely with Matt Garrett, who is working under the auspices of the governor's office as the recovery director. And so just wanted to reinforce what Alana said. At any point that I've been in conversations with either building codes or the Department of Energy, or frankly, other state agencies who are touching this effort, the knowledge that a single biennium does not address the rebuild by any means. And so the notion that we would need to extend this is in front of the right people, and we'll continue that conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. All right. Any additional comments on grant award distribution timing? All right. I am going to move on to the last issue, which at least on my copy still managed to be labeled issue 7, even though it is actually issue 5. That's on me. But it's outreach. So one important determinant of success for this program will be our ability to inform eligible people about the program's existence and the application process. We've held informal community meetings in conjunction with the Department of Energy to talk about both of our incentive programs. We will be working with affected counties to make sure that information about the programs are available to people that are rebuilding. As more details about the program are decided, we will be working with local governments and community-based organizations to perform outreach and education about the program. Basically, what we're interested in is if you have any thoughts on any of the best ways that we can either reach people in your community, reach people in the communities that you serve, just the best ways that we can get information about this program out in as many avenues as possible. Would love to hear an idea about
that. Clearly, as Allison has said repeatedly, I think we need to work through the CBOs in the communities. We find that outreach works far better from person to person than most. That said, there are some commercial enterprises that probably need a different kind of focus. And since our commercial business in this area is predominantly tourism, it may be that there are also some tourist avenues like Traveling County, our local tourism committee, others that we haven't used quite as extensively through this process. For some things that might be more applicable now because of the commercial properties that are eligible for it. And I actually think that this will be very good news for at least a couple of commercial owners. As you were talking, I realized that we had one of our inns completely destroyed, and a collection of cabins, cottages, completely destroyed or almost completely destroyed. And this would be a very significant value to that effort to restore that property. So.
Thank you, Marilyn. Jenny.
Something that I would like to see is if there was some sort of mailing from the county, either to like affected home addresses that they have or in certain areas. Because I know for us, a lot of our neighbors aren't on Facebook. They don't go to some of the community meetings or other things, either for medical reasons or just because, personal choices. And some of them are older and don't use technology all the time. So I think that getting something actually in their mailbox that they can say, oh, okay, that these are some options or resources would be great for them, and for reaching out to a lot of the people, especially if people also are buying some of these properties and they're going to be eligible for them. If they're not part of the community groups on Facebook or know people around, they're not going to know that there are grants available for rebuilding in that area.
Great, thanks, Jay. Allison?
So echoing what everyone has said so far, definitely, I know for ourselves, we already have several ways that we reach out to these families and those affected by the fire. And it does take several different mediums to get out to everyone. And so I would definitely, reach out to either St. Vincent de Paul or Catholic Charities or ODHS. Matt Garrett would be another one, to definitely go through. But these are the ones that are talking with all the families all the time. And so, yeah, definitely let us help with that outreach.
Great. Thanks, Allison. Cass?
Yeah, Jenny brought up a good point about people purchasing these homes or structures. And if they don't know about the grants, that could be a deciding factor. What about real estate agents? They're going to be, really in touch with whoever's searching to buy from anywhere. So I think they might be a good avenue of delivery of information.
Thanks. It's great. Any other thoughts on outreach opportunities? Okay. Oh, Kathleen. You may still be on mute, Kathleen.
I was listening to what people just said, and there are a couple of neighbors of mine who've never been in touch with anybody, didn't have insurance, and they're struggling along. And I don't know how it is that everybody knows. Does everybody know who all the affected people are? I mean, are those people that I know that have not sought any help? Does somebody know they even exist besides me?
I'm not sure. I don't know if your neighbors have been in touch with any of the outreach agencies at all. Our at least right now, the program that we're running does not have we don't have a specific full list of properties. We have sort of a county by county breakdown, but that's it. I mean, where are you, Kathleen? Like what county?
Lynn County.
Lynn County?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Are you in touch with some of the local organizations, Kathleen?
Yes.
Right.
But almost everybody that I'm in touch with is over in Marion County.
Gotcha. Yeah, I've seen a certain amount of crossover between those two. Are you in touch with your neighbors?
Yes.
Could you put them in touch with the support organization?
Yes, but I'm thinking if there are those two, there's probably a lot of people out here that's why they moved to the country, because they didn't want to deal with anybody. So there's probably more than just those two, but.
Yeah, and that is part of the reason we wanted to discuss this question in general, is because we want to be able to put the word out through as many different avenues as possible, just to minimize the possibility that we're going to miss any folks like that. Like, we want to give as many opportunities as we can to get in touch with them.
I was just going to suggest to Kathleen to, if you know your neighbors need assistance, have them call the 211 number, and they will actually get them in contact with somebody in their specific area. There's been a lot of information that cannot be shared between organizations because of privacy information. And also, we, even being a long-term recovery group, we're not shared the information that if you've registered for FEMA, we don't have that information. It's not shared with us. So we don't know to call you out. We've had to do several different modes of reaching out to people. And so, yeah, definitely share with any information with any of your neighbors, to have them call 211. There's plenty of help out there for them.
Thank you, Allison. All right. Any additional thoughts on outreach? All right. I'm not seeing any hands. I want to give an opportunity is if there's an issue that we haven't talked about, something that hasn't fallen into one of the categories that we've talked about here today. I want to give an opportunity if there's folks that are participating that would like to bring up something that we may not have considered, or that basically this is the catch-all. If this is an opportunity, if there's something that you think we should be discussing that we're not, or that we haven't, this is an opportunity to let that fly. All right, I don't want to cut anybody off, but I'm not seeing any hands. Additionally, if there's something that you've thought of from a past issue that we already moved on from and you want to bring it up now, that's another thing that we could do now. If you have anything you want to say, feel free. Okay, I'm still not seeing any hands, but if you think of something, I'm here all day. Kathleen.
Oh, nope, that was an accident.
Oh,
sorry.
Well, it was still good to hear from you again, Kathleen. If there's anybody here that was not registered as a participant, that was just observing, or that did not want to register, that has something that they'd like to say at this point, I sort of welcome all comers. If you want to raise your hand and have anything you want to add to the discussion that we've had today, I'd encourage you to do so. Kathleen, getting my hopes up again?
You're cute. I mean, this is really basic. I did not register for this. I kind of came into this whole thing late, and you're referring to lists and stuff. I don't even know where any of that is.
Okay. Are you able to open up the chat, Kathleen?
Pardon me?
Are you able to open up the chat? Towards the bottom of your screen, there's that little chat icon.
Yes.
If you scroll all the way up to the top of the chat, there is a link to the agenda documents for this meeting. And that'll have sort of a list of all of the issues that we've been discussing, as well as the two menu items that we were relating to that one issue in terms of the fire hardening measures.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Michael Friels.
Thank you, Andy. I just wanted to jump in, and I know the Oregon Department of Energy has been referenced a couple of times. So my name is Michael Friels. I'm an analyst for the Oregon Department of Energy, and we also have a comparable program where we're offering energy efficiency incentives to help people as they build back. Incentives for people just building back to our current code or beyond that, including additional energy efficiency measures to make their homes be more energy efficient. I guess I should say structures, residential or commercial structures, just like Andy's program he's been describing. And so I just want to put a plug for that. I can put within the chat our draft rules that we have going. We're at the similar stage where we're doing our rulemaking as well. And we certainly welcome feedback. And we have a public comment portal if you have any interest in providing feedback or taking a look at our rules. And we'll have a public hearing in January as well. So we'd love to get additional feedback. And so I just want to make a plug for our program, and hopefully these programs will work together seamlessly. And Andy and I are going to work on that and try to make the process easy as possible so people can take advantage of incentives for both programs. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. And we still got 4 minutes left. We can fill that with all the time that you want. But if there's nobody that wants to speak, we can always also give you a little bit of time back. Okay. I'm not seeing any additional hands. Feel free to interrupt me if you feel like it in the next couple minutes. But just as a sort of wrap up, if you have any additional comments that you think of, if you have the sort of the immediately hanging up the phone and then immediately realizing that there's something that you should have said that you forgot, do not dismay. For those that RSVP'd for the meeting, that same rulescoordinator.bcd@dcbs.oregon.gov, which I'm going to politely ask Laura or Melissa maybe to post to the chat just so that we could capture anybody that maybe didn't have it previously. If you want to go ahead, you can send anything you think of to that email and reference the Fire Hardening Grant Program. If you have more thoughts about these issues or anything else, and I see your hand, Allison, just 1 second. And we're going to be sort of accepting additional commentary through that all the way up through December 17th, 2021. So we'll be continuing to consider any comments that comes in through that route while we're commencing our rulemaking after this meeting. So please send anything you can think of our way. And Allison.
Just real quick, I just wanted to know, can we announce this that is coming to our survivors? Because we have a town hall tonight regarding other things. Okay, thank you.
No, thank you.
Maybe it'd be a good time to shout out, maybe I'll ask Laura and Melissa nicely to post in the chat the webpage we have where we're going to be updating it with all the information about this program. So you can share that. It shows what we know now, which is, some stuff, and then we'll continue to add to it as we fill in the details that you all are helping us figure out now.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah. Oh, Jenny.
I was just wondering what the current kind of timeline or hope for getting this program initiated currently is.
Our target right now is to start processing applications on February 1st. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any additional hands. I'll check one last time before I truly sign off. But I really want to thank everyone for participating. It helps a lot to have the additional input and the additional expertise that comes with all of your help on this. And I really think it makes the final product, the final rulemaking product, and the grant program in this case, a better final product and better able to help people that need that help. So thank you so much for taking time out of your afternoon to help us. And it was great talking with you. Have a good afternoon.